Welcome to Brews Business. My name is Jacob Dubois, and today we are chatting with Ian Bouchett, an entrepreneur who has built, scaled, and sold businesses. Most recently, Ian is the Director of Revenue Operations at Reconciled and the founder of Cellivate, a virtual sales analytics and advisory service. Ian, welcome to Brews Business.
Thanks, Jacob.
I'm so excited to have you, and the audience will soon find out why. You're a fascinating character, and I have some questions, but I imagine that most of this conversation you will run with your interesting stories, and we'll just have a blast. So before we get started with those questions, we always test the brew. Let us know what you're drinking over there.
Right now, I didn't actually fully read the label of this. It's a company out of Isla Verde, Puerto Rico, which is close to where I'm at right now, that makes this liquor called Ocean. Right? Great. They make their brewery that makes beer called Ocean, and
Makes
born
sense.
on the beach. This is a Maya West. Let's see, it's a lager.
Nice.
That's delicious. It's super good.
That's great. I also have a lager out of California. It's called Taco Truck, and I got it mostly because it says taco in the name. So we'll see how it goes. You said you liked yours?
What's that?
You said you enjoyed your beer over there?
Yeah, this one's really good. I also really bottle art is important to me, arguably too much so. And then the other beer that I had from them that I grabbed is this, and I don't know if you can see that, but it's this scuba
Whoa,
diver holding a bag of hops.
that's so cool.
It's very good.
Yeah,
It's
I
very
mean,
their branding is just right.
that deserves a purchase for sure. I would buy that too. All right, let's get the audience warmed up on Ian. Can you talk us through the evolution, mainly your professional career? I want to hear, give us that first venture that got you going,
Yep.
and then walk us all the way up till today, if you don't mind.
Awesome. I've been practicing a short-winded version of my career story. There's no way to do it, man. There's no way to do it. It's upsetting. So, little preemptive background. So my wife and I have been together for almost 15 years now. When we were 2 months into dating, though, I was in high school. We found out when I was 16, she was about to turn 20. We found out we were 2 months pregnant, 4 months into dating, 2 months pregnant with our oldest son. So life moved very rapidly for me. I actually went right out of high school into finance, right? I had an immediate need to provide for a family. Suddenly, my family's been in businesses in Vermont for a long time. My grandfather founded Homeport on Church Street. Originally, it was Pier 1 Imports. So they've been a member of the Burlington business community for a long time. They own the Ashley Furniture Home Store on Shelburne Road, which is where I was working full time through high school. I went to high school in the evenings through an online type program. So I went right from working for my family business and going to high school. Right from that, graduated high school, went into finance, working with a financial firm out of Essex, Vermont, and I learned a ton there. It was not something I wanted to do permanently, but it was a very deliberate educational experience that I knew I wanted. I knew I wanted that background. I wanted to be finance trained. I wanted to understand complex financial products, and by all means, it delivered on all fronts there. From there, I got an awesome opportunity to work in the banking and credit union space, and worked for a couple of different organizations over a 8-year period of time-ish, supporting largely it was software focused, but also some consulting work, working with different banks, small banks, and credit unions across the East Coast of the U.S. So a lot of travel up and down the East Coast, but really, really cool gig. Really awesome firms and people that I got to work with there. And I learned I sort of did a dive even deeper into the financial organizations and how they were structured and what they looked like from the inside and how they were being led. At a certain point, I always knew I wanted to run my own company. My whole family has been entrepreneurs. I've known since I was, my career goals went from like, I'm going to be a rock star to, okay, I'm probably not going to be a rock star, but I am going to be an entrepreneur, right? Like that was the sequence of events for me. Somewhere around 11 or 12, that was the move. Going to be an entrepreneur. So I had a conversation with my dad. I was right in between things at like kind of a career pivotal point. I had been asked to run a gym fitness business. And I was talking to my dad about it, and my dad said, "Why aren't you opening your own business? Why would you go do it and go and manage this when you know what you really want to be doing?" And I was like, "Well, that's an interesting question." I said, "Well, I don't really have the money to start what I would want to start." And he said, "You're never going to have enough money. You're never going to feel like you've got enough money to do what you want to do. You got to just figure it out, bootstrap it, get off your ass and make it happen." Which was interesting advice kind of from my dad, because he's kind of a conservative guy, right? Like, he plays it pretty safe. He's smart. He's seen a lot. He's been through a lot. So that was an interesting perspective to hear coming from him, of just like, you know what, just take the risk, go all in. And if you fail, whatever. And I was like, well, that's interesting. So on the way home, my wife and I created a concept for two businesses that we wanted to open: an indoor cycling studio and a juice bar. And the primary focus was on the juice bar. My wife has been in nutrition. She's been studying nutrition since I met her. She's evolved that quite a bit and gotten involved in Ayurveda and yoga and sports nutrition. So she's well educated in that front. And the juice trend was on the upswing at that time, right? This was like 2011, maybe 2012. It must have been. Yeah, 2012 it must have been. And we were like, okay, well, let's do this. I went home and I started, putting together the business plan for that organization. One of my favorite authors, I'll sort of name drop from a business starting book. I don't know if you've ever read the book The Art of the Start. Guy Kawasaki started the Macintosh division of Apple. I really like Guy Kawasaki. He's super straightforward, and he just like kind of plainly lays it out. It's kind of a funny character too. I don't know if you ever listen to his stuff, but I was like, okay, I'm just gonna follow the Guy Kawasaki model for starting a business. I'm gonna keep it super simple. It's gonna be kind of a 3-pager business plan that just focuses on the meat of reality, right? No BS, no complex analysis that are meaningless, no overwhelming statement of the overall size of the market in the US. No, I'm just going to focus on the landscape that I know, the Burlington community, and we're going to build this business plan. And we ended up building 2 really cool businesses. We built our juice bar. We built our indoor cycling studio, and both experienced some reasonable success, and was a lot of fun to do. It was a lot of work. I gained a whole new, I always had an entrepreneurial appreciation with my background, and whatever I had increased tenfold, and it permanently impacted the way that I think about work in general. But it was great, and it was a lot of fun. And we did that for about 5 years. There were 2 businesses running in parallel: our cycling studio and our juice bar. And we had plans to expand the juice bar. And we had, which we eventually did, and we had plans to just continue running the cycling studio because it was a fun business to run. My wife was teaching a lot of classes, and folks were really enjoying spending time with her. And I was teaching some classes, albeit probably less effectively than she was, because she's just better at that than I am. But and then we had a team of instructors all doing a great job. It was just a fun, energetic thing to do. About 4 years into it, on our way to one of the cycling classes, my wife had gotten into a car accident, and it was a pretty crazy car accident. Actually, she was sort of aesthetically fine from it, and is fine from it. She's fully recovered now, as much as you can ever be from like some serious impact. But for a while, for a period of time, it seriously impacted the capacity at which she could continue to conduct classes. And it kind of pulled the rug out from under that a little bit. It seemed a little more, started to feel more like work than it is, right? Like, passion-based businesses are always most fun when you can do running on the pure fuel of passion, so that when you work a 14-hour day, you don't care. And that made it really tough for a good period of time. And right at that time, we had an opportunity to exit that business. Somebody had come to us, really liked our concept, like the model that we had built, the training model, the program model, the branding, and we had an opportunity to get out of that. And we sort of decided very quickly, like, you know what, this is a good time to transition away from that. We have this other thing going on. And at that point, the juice bar also was fairly well staffed and well organized. It was just a good transition point to kind of take some time a little bit. And we've got young kids. We've got our oldest son who's now 12, and our youngest who's about to turn 10 in a couple of weeks. And we were like, this is good. This will be a healthy transition for us. And right around that time, I reached out to a friend of mine, because it freed up quite a bit of my time. And I was like, well, I can use that time somewhere else and I can go get involved in the professional arena in a way that I haven't been able to while we're running our businesses. And that friend of mine is in venture capital, and he was a mutual friend of Michael Lee, who owns Reconcile. Reconcile was in its infancy at the time, pretty much. It was a young company. Michael had started it about a year and a half, 2 years earlier, maybe a little bit before that, but still very much a ramp up startup. Michael and a team of bookkeepers was what the organization was at the time, and a small team of bookkeepers at that, right? A lot of part-time help. And I got introduced to Michael, and Michael and I hit it off right away, right? Very similar energy, very similar ideas and passion for business and entrepreneurship and outlook on like finance philosophy. So that was an immediate, all right, we would work well together. And of course, if you know Michael, he's an easy guy to get along with, right? So everybody probably feels like they hit it off with Michael, but I think we felt like we were onto something. So I jumped in full time right into that. And it was not long into that transition that I said, this is fun. Like, this is what I want to spend all my time doing that. And it was at that point that, we were Reconciled as a fully remote company. We had some traveling that we wanted to do, and retail food service is a beast. It's a ton of work. And we were like, you know what, let's transition out of that and let's focus our effort on what's going on at Reconciled. And I had the opportunity to get involved at a higher level at Reconciled, and we had some pretty ambitious growth goals that we've been fortunate enough to achieve over the last 5 years so far. And that was, the rest is, as they say, history, right? About a year ago, right? The other end of that is my firm Celivate, right? I started a company called Celivate, and it is really just it's sort of the distilling of the sales philosophies, because I got involved with Reconciled as the first salesperson and the future leader of the revenue operations team in charge of sales marketing. I'm involved in product development. I'm involved in overall strategic organization. It's been a bit of a case study on what works and what doesn't. And then to combine that with the other experience that I have in sales and account management, all the other stuff that sort of culminated into me being really effective at Reconciled, and the team that we built at Reconciled, and what's made them really effective. We've just learned a ton, and I'm sort of counter to typical salespeople. I'm a little type A and really organized and really deliberate about how I document things and document processes. And Celivate has been sort of the distilled version of like, hey, how do we build sales infrastructure that works? How do we build a sales team that works? What's important as we recruit for sales positions? What metrics need to be measured so that we can guarantee that we can hit sales goals? And so that's been something fun I've been able to do on the side when very much my full effort is still absolutely on what we're doing at Reconciled, because it really is it's really something.
That's what an amazing journey. And first of all, I appreciate you sharing that. And I have one question that brings you back a little bit before we go forward. Was there anything that you got into? I know you kind of had to mature pretty quickly as a 16-year-old. Were there any small ventures or businesses that you got into before that? Were you selling baseball cards or anything like that, or you were just preoccupied with this rock star career?
Yeah, that's a great question. There were a lot of preliminary business plans that sort of crossed my desk, both independently and with friends of mine who were also building their own careers in entrepreneurship. Everything from literally a microbrewery and we've had other fitness event organizations that we've talked about, and nothing that I felt passionate enough about to bet it all on. And I think that was really the key difference, right? The timing has to be right. I think with anybody who's got an entrepreneurial spirit, like, that's cool. And that's terminology that's like slapped around a lot, right? A lot of people feel really cool about their entrepreneurial spirit. But it takes a tremendous amount of guts to be like, oh no, like a paycheck and like healthcare? No thanks. Like, I'm going to bet everything on this. All ideas are good, right? Everybody's got good ideas. But no, I actually believe enough in my ability to execute on that idea that I'm going to be able to pay my rent next month. Like that takes a tremendous amount of guts. So you have two options. You either have to be a little crazy or you have to really want to do it, right? You've got to be so freaking passionate about it that you're like, no way, man. I'm not going to be happy unless I'm doing this weird thing over here. And I'm going to do it until I'm successful at it. And frankly, it helps if there's a little bit of both, right? If you're a little crazy and you're passionate about the thing, you all the better. But yeah, so a lot of things like that, right? And usually I did have a tendency to always kind of think a little bigger than baseball cards, as is the example that you gave. Not that you can't make a great living on baseball cards, I'm sure, but every time I've contemplated a business venture, if it didn't come with the caveat of scalability, as the potential of scalability, it didn't last long floating up there in the abyss that is my idea center.
I love it. All right. We're definitely going to come back to scalability because I think you have a lot of experience there, and you also, you've proven yourself to be able to implement and scale systems that really help businesses grow. So I definitely want to jump back to that. Does it feel like you wanted to jump into sales, or were you kind of just thrown into it in a way of searching for a new opportunity that you were excited about and then realized that you were pretty good at it?
Yeah, that's a really cool question. So when I guess I was 12 years old, probably, I started like working weekends at my dad's furniture business. And I just like talking to people, right? I've always liked talking to people. I like listening to people, maybe more importantly, right? I'm doing a lot of talking today because you're doing a great job asking questions, but I do like to shut my mouth and listen to people on occasion. And so I was just having a lot of fun with it. And the sales manager at the time that was working for my dad was gunning for me to participate in sales time because the customers enjoyed talking with me, and probably helped that I was like a goofy 12-year-old kid with a goofy personality and very non-threatening, right? Like he's not gonna, there's this fear that lives in people's brains of like these salespeople are going to come and manipulate them into buying something they don't need, right? Which if you know somebody that has that superpower, please let me know. But the reality is like there's no manipulation on the table. But I didn't have that threatening factor at 12 years old, and it was an easy in. So I was given an opportunity early to get into sales, and I jumped on that. I wanted to do it. I was excited about making money, and I knew I'd be able to make money doing that because it was a commission-only sales job. It was commission versus minimum wage in that role, selling furniture at the store, and I did pretty well. I did pretty well as a 13, 14-year-old kid. I was able to pull in like $35,000 a year, right? Which is like super cool for a 13, 14-year-old kid. I was like, I'm rich.
Yeah, that's no joke.
And then I had no living expenses. So I was having a lot of fun doing that, and I was fortunate to be in a home study program that worked kind of like online school works now. That online school wasn't really a big thing at the time, so it was done through mail correspondence, but it was a remote school, private high school that I attended, and that enabled me to work full time during the day and make a killing by my standard at the store. And I liked it. I liked the rush of it, right? I've said in some of my talks and stuff like that I always say that to be successful at sales, you need to be a social adrenaline junkie, right? You need to be like addicted to the thrill of a success, because if you're not, like, you look at any sales metric table and the amount of rejection and just obliteration you have to pummel through to get to a yes is brutal. And in my opinion, unless you're like masochistic in that respect, right, and you just want to take an emotional beating on a daily basis, like, you have to be hooked on the high of the win enough to be able to to take that kind of abuse. Otherwise, you'll never last. You'll just be like depressed a week in when 1,000 people have said no to you, and your poor little heart will break.
I love it, and it's so true. And if you think about it, this is something that I've noticed with my own business, and then also other business owners, is there's that sale. You have that sales opportunity where you're meeting with a potential new client, and it's pretty nerve wracking for some. And you have two options that you kind of just touched on there. You either get excited about that nervousness of, what if they object this way or that way, or you get even more nervous and worried about what they may say or what they may object to. Are you willing to step up and take on the challenge and say, yeah, you know what, I know it's expensive, but here are the results that we can, provide for you? Or are you just, waiting to take a dagger to the heart when they just say, I think your plan or your service is just crap? So
Absolutely.
I think it definitely takes, a certain breed to be willing to, step up to the plate and fight some of the toughest battles, because, there's just so many opportunities out there for business owners that, everyone's getting solicited all the time. And so how do you set yourself apart and then face their skepticism with open hands, and be willing to work through some of the questions they have, but also be patient, and not rush people. So what are some of your thoughts on how to cope with some of these things that just happen to be a factor of being in the selling world? How do you be patient with people, but also force them to make a decision in some cases? What are some of your learnings there?
Yeah, that's a maybe impossible balance, right? It's a bit of a pendulum. I learned more about rejection and objection fighting in financial services than I learned in any other space. I think that in general, people kind of build businesses in a lot of ways to be easy on themselves in certain ways, right? And taking the abuse of rejection is tough. Financial services industry is a bit of an exception to that, right? So, if anybody wants a crash course or boot camp in how to handle objections and how to take a massive volume of abuse, I highly recommend they do a 6 to 12-month stint in financial services of any call of any kind, and they cold call 40 to 100 people a day, and they get hung up on and screamed at face to face. I think that there's different stages of there's obviously different stages of the sales cycle, and most people are familiar with those stages. But I think that what they're not familiar with is the different conversations you need to be having, the different salesperson you need to be at each of those stages. And the really good salespeople are good at all those stages. So, you hear and read about people who are like really good closers. Well, I've never observed an environment where somebody kicks off the sales process and builds trust with the clientele and then can hand it off to somebody who's like a really good closer. And that guy like hits a home run with it, or gal hits a home run with it. Like, I don't think that works. I've never seen it work. If somebody's making that work, give me a shout. Let me know. I'm super curious about why it works. So much of the sales process is about building trust with people. And it has to be done in a different way at different stages. And then you can, just like any sort of Covey philosophy, or you watch TED Talks for 5 minutes, and you'll learn about, the social equity, social capital. It really comes down to that, right? In the early stages of the sales process, you have no social capital, so you got nothing to lose, right? Maybe you're a little more aggressive to get in front of someone, and then you're in the trust building stage, right? So you're trying to build social capital. The only way that you can do that is by getting them to talk and them to open up, right? That's how people build trust with you, which is ironic because I learned very little about you when I'm sitting here talking like a maniac. But at the end of it, I'm like, man, it felt good to get all that off my chest, I really like that Jacob guy. I told him all sorts of stuff. Meanwhile, you were just like there silently like nodding and making eye contact. And then you seal that, right? You drive that home by showing some acknowledgement that you actually heard what I said, right? Like sitting there on the other end and asking a thought-provoking question that's related to what I just talked about. And I go, oh yeah, he really was listening. Like, he really does care about what I'm talking about. And now you've got this social capital. You've got a relationship, and you can exploit that. Exploit's a little bit of a harsh word, maybe the wrong choice of words, but you're using that as a tool to get you through the future stages and to have those more challenging conversations, like negotiating price, for example, articulating value against price, right? The second the money conversation comes out. If you don't have the communication capital to be successful in that stage of the conversation, then you didn't do the early stages right. And you didn't build this foundation of communication that will get you down the line. So I don't know how anybody can come in cold and close when there's no trust there, unless something like real estate. I know this happens sometimes in real estate, so I'm going to throw the real estate industry under the bus here. When you get into the end of contract negotiation and somebody needs to be, I don't know if I can say this word on your podcast, the dick, right? If somebody needs to come in and be the dick and just the jerk who has a hard line and a hard stop and has no relationship with you, so I don't owe you anything. No, that's the bottom line, right? They're going to sidestep the system a little bit and maybe do it in a less tasteful way. But I'm not going to leave feeling as good about the relationship with the company. I might still feel good about my relationship with my sales guy, but certainly at Reconcile, that's not the culture we've tried to build, and it's not the culture I would want to employ at any organization that I'm responsible for culture development. Is if you do that, they haven't built trust with the organization, they build trust with the individual. So that's another nuance where if you do have some situation where somebody's responsible for closing, that you're gonna get yourself into trouble.
Yeah, and all I can think about right now, right at this moment, is the only other place where I've seen it is like a used car sales dealership, right? You got that finance guy. He's not really, I guess he's not really the closer per se, but he's always the one that's like, you try to negotiate with your sales rep and they're like, well, I don't know, we got to talk to Chad. And it's just like some random finance director who's the numbers guy. And he's always so hard on you. He's like, literally, this is the lowest we can go. And if you sit there for 20, 30 minutes, they end up going lower, which doesn't make any sense because he said, this is the lowest we can go. And you're kind of, at that point, I think, it's a bit of a ploy because you're on the same team as your sales rep against the finance guy, right? It's not you versus sales rep. It's you versus finance guy, which might be, some strategy there, but it's really not what people want to be up against now. And we see that as more and more people buy. I mean, because of COVID, people are buying cars online, but they're willing to pay the price for convenience for you to drop it off at their house. They don't really need to fight with anyone anymore. So it's kind of, it's a great point. I really don't think that closing should be one person's job unless it's a segmented part of the system of like, these are people that said no, one last shot in the dark, have our best closer, call them 6 months down the road or something like that.
Oh, and you're dead on, and that's probably even a better example in the car sales. And if you look at what happens in automobile economics, right? There's this huge disconnect. The margins on cars are not great unless you're buying a Tesla. You're literally in this environment where you're hacking away at margin because there's no trust built. And when you take the example of the finance guy, the car dealership does that because they see this advantage of being able to be the hard stop, the hard no, the hard, I got no relationship with you. Plus, we can build this facade of it's the salesman versus you, which is ridiculous because the salesman's commission is directly tied to the value of the car in most cases. So he's not really on your team. He's just there to trick you into thinking he's on your team. So he can tell you, no, this is the best deal you're going to get. Just accept it. When in reality, if there was a little more effort put into the sales relationship, there wouldn't be so much questioning of the value, right? And it's one of the reasons that when we have that social capital, we don't need to negotiate so much, right? It's like we've already got the trust that I presented you with the best value. Like wheeling and dealing is not a part of the culture here because we've got a relationship here where do you really think that I didn't already give you the best Like what are you saying here? Like we go deep, man. Like, why would I not even present you with the best possible scenario? Why do you even need to talk to this guy? I'll talk to that guy for you, and then I'll come out here and I'll give you the situation as I see it. But salespeople are afraid to negotiate for themselves. For micromanagement teams don't have confidence in their team to be able to negotiate for themselves, and it's why you end up with the lousy used car dealership.
Oh,
Or
boy,
used
I could analyze that for days. It feels like it's so fascinating. But I do want to keep moving here. And something I want to chat about because I think it's helpful to others and also to me. So I'm wondering, can we peel back the envelope on, some of these sales processes that you may have and reconciled or other businesses? How do you have, scalable processes, at volume? Did it just happen, or did you find out, okay, this works, then how do we systematize it?
So there's some things that are really obvious and talked about all the time in terms of scalability, right? Like you can't be infinitely scalable and be a micromanager, right? You're going to be able to wrap your hands around like 6 to 9 people, and then what? You expect to micromanage another 6 to 9 people through those 6 to 9 people? It's never going to happen. You're going to burn yourself out. One concept that I know is discussed in other scalability programs is the idea that you need to have a high trust culture, and you need to understand and have your team understand that outcomes are important. The way in which you achieve those outcomes are not really. With my team, I emphasize a moral compass, right, as a decision-making tool, right? And I tell everybody that works for me, if you have made a decision on the fly, right or wrong, by my standard, right, whether it's the decision I would have made or the decision I wouldn't have made, and you're never going to make all the decisions I would make, but if you make a decision, if you're in a situation where you have to make a decision on the fly, and your decision is consistent with what you feel was ethically or morally right in that circumstance, and you can stand behind it and say, I just did what I thought was right in our favor or out of our favor as an organization, I'm not going to be upset. I'm never going to be upset about it. If you're like, oh yeah, I gave them a full refund, and I'm like, well, I wouldn't have given them a full refund. And you're like, well, I thought they deserved it because of this, this, and that. I'd be like, all right, oh, that sucks. Like, but all right. Because if it really is the ethical thing to do, right? Like we pride ourselves on being an ethical organization. We pride ourselves on having a moral compass that drives our decision making. Why there's literally no circumstance where you would do something following an ethical or moral compass that would conflict with something I would have done. Now, that's entirely possible that would be the case, right? You might see things through a different lens and be like, that doesn't seem fair. And I'd be over here going, yeah, it is fair. But if you believed it was fair, then it was fair because I wasn't there. So that's one big thing that helps me scale and delegate those things is by giving them that guide. Because what happens is if they don't go, oh man, Ian's going to confront me about this, and I can't say that it was the most fair situation, then they know I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that thing. It's too risky. Too risky if I can't stand behind it. And then of course the same is true for outcomes, right? So if I give them a set of outcomes, I needed to do, we're a metrics focused organization. I'm metrics focused with the work that I do at Cellivate, right? That's one of the things that I focus on is if you want to achieve $1 million in sales, well, what's your average sale size, and how many consults do you need to do to get us an average sale, and how many cold calls do you need to make to get an average consult? And then from there, we know if you want to do $1 million in annual revenue, then you have to make 300,000 calls. End of transaction. Like it's not hard. It's hard to make the 300,000 calls, but the rest is just math. If you believe in math, I do. We define at the beginning of the year, some very specific outcomes we're driving for because we know our metrics. We know, hey, we want to do this much revenue. Hey, we know to do this much revenue, we need to close this many deals because our average deal size is this. Hey, we know to close this many deals, we need to talk to this many people and do this many consults. And we know to talk to that many people and do that many consults, we need to put out this many advertisements or send this many emails or do this many phone calls. And then all we have to do on a day-by-day basis is track that top of that funnel and just go, well, did we make enough calls today or not? Because if we didn't make enough calls today, then we either need to make more calls today to tomorrow to make up for it, or we need to do that. So that is the only pulse I need on my team at that point, pretty much, because they're following their compass. They obviously need to be trained in our systems, and they're driving for a very specific outcome. And then the last scalability tip is something else that I drive home really frequently: is stop spending time doing things that you've done before. Right, the second you do a task twice, bake it into an automation. Build a template. If you got a Mac, I use a Mac. I use the key shortcuts, right? I send the same email 100 times a week. Same exact one. Oh, cool. Great to meet you. Would love to schedule some time to chat, right? It's a thoughtful email. It's a nice email. But I don't say something new every time. So I don't need to retype those same words every time. I literally type in RECINTRO. Rec intro. That's my reconciled intro. And it'll ask that question: you free Tuesday or Thursday? Like, I don't need to type that every time. It's not efficient. So I encourage my whole team to build efficiencies like that, and just build a shortcut in your keyboard, build a sequence in HubSpot, build a template in Gmail. All the tools are there.
You kind of hit it right on the head, because there's no shortage of these tools available to us, right? There's 1,000,001 CRMs. There's 1,000,001 Gmail shortcuts, widgets, extensions. Everything is out there. It's, if you do have some lofty goals that require you to keep in contact with a lot of people or reach out to a lot of people, it's how do we facilitate 300,000 phone calls, cold calls, in order to reach that $1 million in revenue. And, typing every email is just not going to cut it. That's, there's ways to personalize things. And I assume that you would probably recommend that you personalize maybe further down the road when somebody's, closer to converting rather than upfront and, running through their website
Totally.
and trying to get some important information for an open or something. If your velocity of the sales team is just so quick, you need these shortcuts in order to hit some of those numbers, unless you just have a huge sales team, which at that point obviously makes that revenue goal probably go even higher unnecessarily. I really love those thoughts, and I think scalability is obviously something that a lot of people talk about, but giving your sales reps the decision or the power to make decisions based on a moral compass or a company agreed upon guide is so smart. And I think that's one of the key things in order to delegate properly. So it seems like you've nailed that. We're switching up here a little bit. I've got a question about failures. If I say a favorite failure of yours, does anything come to mind?
Great question. Favorite failure. There's probably no specific situation. It was more of a recurrence of failure during a period of time. But there was definitely a period of time early enough in the management of my own businesses that I would frequently attach myself to an idea or a way of doing something that was unnecessary, right? There wasn't enough fluidity. There wasn't enough flexibility. And I would argue that is probably my favorite failure, because it's something I've really, later on in my career, I've really been able to acknowledge that and understand when that lack of fluidity is holding me back, and apply it immediately, right? And it's everything from being dead set on how I want to negotiate a specific deal to like a contract, or an over-reliance on a particular employees or group of employees, or being set on offering a certain set of products and things like that. I have a much more realistic view of things, I guess, right? Where I just look at hard truths with no real emotion attached to it. And that's been really liberating.
I like that. And I think unfortunately, a lot of us have to go through those moments, and it's a matter of how quickly do you realize them and start using them as lessons rather than reality.
Absolutely.
And so I resonate with that a lot. And I think a lot of people will feel a similar way, because there's just, that's just kind of natural, and it depends on how quickly your self-awareness kicks in and you understand, okay, I'm too emotional about this employee, or
Right.
and start looking at the metrics related to your goals, which you've said before. Like, if the goals are there and you've agreed to have a certain goal, whether it be revenue or company size or whatever, it's like, well, let's start making that our North Star. These metrics on a daily, weekly basis. Let's not get emotional about certain things. So I really think that's huge, and it's important to recognize that a lot of people go through stuff like that. I mean, that's regardless of what you're doing or where you are, you could argue that people are feeling that certain way about different parts of their lives.
Oh, totally. Especially when they're a business owner. It's easy to attach your emotion. When you're that passionate about something, it's hard not to attach your emotion to your preferred approach.
Right.
Yeah.
That's cool. All right. So you're in Puerto Rico right now, and I know that's not uncommon for you. What's your philosophy on traveling while scaling, all the different businesses that you have your hands in?
Well, there's two main philosophies that I think help me do what we do when we're traveling and when we're going nomadic or just doing a winter in Puerto Rico or whatever it is. I don't care when I work. I only care what I need to get done. So it's just part of my personality. I don't count my hours. I know I work plenty. I don't if it's 9 p.m. at night and I feel like there's something I'd really like to get done before tomorrow, that does not bother me. If there's something I want to get up at 4 a.m. and get done before the sun rises, that does not bother me. I don't feel like anybody owes me anything, to the point where I have a hard time taking vacation time because I'm like, well, I don't know. There's always stuff I want to get done. I don't feel like work is this torture that's imposed on me. And that definitely comes from entrepreneurship, because I probably wasn't that way before I ran my own companies, but I love what I do right now. So why would I say, oh, I don't know, it's 5:30 p.m. Like, no, I'm sorry. I like it. Like, it's a lot of fun for me. So there's no reason not to do it when it needs to get done. So that helps a lot, because time zones and stuff and flights and whatever, like wherever you're being on the road, or being flexible with your schedule because you need to figure something out, that all helps. And then I do have, because we are a remote firm and we built our company as a remote firm, I do have, I'm privileged in that I can kind of disappear into my machine, and the rest of the setting does not have much of a hold on me. So, you might see a different background right here, but I have the exact same applications. I engage with them in the exact same way. All I need is a stable surface and a place to sit, and I can be pretty dialed in, with barring some exceptions. Like, internet connectivity is important. And every Airbnb, I message beforehand. I say, will you do a quick speed test for me? Like, do you have stable internet? And they respond back, and almost always they give me a speed test. And if not, they give me some assurance. And that so far has always worked.
How did you get started traveling and working? For somebody that wants to do it, and arguably there's probably no better time to do it than right now. Well, maybe at least somewhere around right now.
Yeah, it's a little tough right now, but I agree. It's like this paradox where everybody suddenly can travel and nobody can travel. But there are exceptions, and I just wrote a blog post for one of the blogs that we run at Reconciled, onlinebookkeepingservice.com, about getting to Puerto Rico and what that was like, and what the quarantine expectations were and the testing expectations. And it is, when we started here in Puerto Rico, actually, a couple of years ago. We had been running our businesses. We hadn't taken a vacation in 5 years at the time. I don't think we had taken a real vacation. We had visited some family in Florida for a week, and that was pretty much it. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs resonate with that. They don't take time off because they don't understand that travel and time off aren't mutually exclusive. You don't need to be off of work to be able to enjoy a new scenery. So we did that. We came to Puerto Rico. We stayed in a little tiny place because we still had a full set of expenses at home, and we're we're conservative financially, and we were like, hey, let's just go and enjoy the beach, and we'll live outside the whole time. So what does it matter? And that was great, and it was exactly what we had hoped it would be. We were here for 2 months, and while we were here, we were like, this is great. Like this is totally manageable. All the things we thought that would be challenges were challenges, but then were quickly overcome. And we can't imagine a circumstance where we can't continue doing this. And while we were on this trip, we sort of started making arrangements for what we were going to do next. And this is 2019, beginning of 2019, January. And we pretty much decided while we were here in Puerto Rico on the beach, we said, my wife and I had coffee on the beach and said, you know what, let's get home. Let's sell everything we own. That way we won't have a home expense at home, a car expense at home. We won't have all those things to worry about, internet, heat, whatever. When you rent an Airbnb, everything's included, right? You get a similar lifestyle. And America, particularly New England and Vermont, very expensive places to live. So if we just applied that same budget to our travel budget, we'd be able to stay in these amazing places and see these amazing things and experience that whole thing. So we just pretty much decided that there in that moment. We came home, we executed, we went through, we sold everything. We tried to sell the big stuff that was hard to sell first, right? The stuff we really liked. Like I've been playing guitars since I was a kid. I sold all my guitars. We sold our furniture, right? So we had this big empty house, and I sold computers and like stuff I had, just gear you accumulate, snowboards and mountain bikes and everything. The kids went through that exercise with us, which was really cool because they were able to establish this sort of like heady non-attachment to things that is kind of mind-blowing for most modern American families. Certainly was for us, right? It's just like, oh man, these kids are like, they're kind of above possessions in a way, right? Like they don't necessarily think of that as having much importance. They're more excited about going to the next place. And that's exactly what it became. So yeah, we emptied our house in Shelburne, Vermont, and packed everything up into a 5x10 storage unit, which, by the way, once we emptied that 5x10 storage unit, I was like, why do we keep this? Like, what is, like, photo albums? You should have taken a picture of them and thrown them. Like, it was like stuff like that is like stuff, but like we could have placed it all. It was kind of silly. So that was a lesson learned. And we got rid of stuff that we did love, that we wanted to buy again when we came back to get our home in Vermont again. And we did that. But then we also sold a bunch of stuff or kept a bunch of stuff that is still in my basement now in labeled boxes because why? And we bounced around. It was amazing, but it was well worth it, every second of it.
It sounds incredible. All right, last question here. What was the best part of your day today?
My day today? Well, I welcomed a new team member today, which is very exciting. We're doing a lot of hiring right now because the firm is growing pretty quickly. And a big part of our plans for this year is building out the revenue operations team because we've set yet another round of lofty revenue goals and we have every expectation of knocking them out of the park. So we're making a lot of hires right now. And this is the first outside hire we've had for a new department I created that's focused around customer satisfaction, really. It's a sort of a traditional account management role, but that's exciting because it's where I get to plant a lot of those early seeds that we talked about earlier that relate to scalability and creating, you have to set it up from day one. Otherwise, you're going to set yourself up for accidental micromanagement. I don't have the physical time to do and still hit all of our goals. So it's very anxious and exciting to get that set up in the front end of things. And I got to go through the start of that, and that's very, very cool. And this was fun too.
That's exciting. I'm happy for you, Ian. Thanks for joining. I have one last request. Where people may be interested in reaching out to you, chatting with you. Where do you want to point them?
That's a great question. So anybody can connect with me on LinkedIn. I would welcome that. I'm not responsive on LinkedIn, unfortunately, because I'm not really a social media guy. You're welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn. My email address and cell phone number actually are in my description there, acknowledging my lameness when it comes to message response. And of course, ian@reconciled.com.
Awesome. It was a pleasure to have you. Thanks for joining for Brews Business.
Awesome. My pleasure, Jacob. Good catching up, man.